Good morning. Welcome to the Worcester Senior Center. I am Bill O'Connor from Life Care Center of Auburn. Today we have a special event. We have Navigating the Courthouse. With us today is Superior Court Judge Karin Bell. So for those...
No one ever does that when I come into the courtroom. So thank you.
So if anybody's ever been summoned for jury duty, received a notice to appear at the courthouse, it can be a daunting task. So Karin is here today to explain how everything works and make it a little easier for everybody. So welcome, Karin.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. I am excited to be here. Normally, the first thing I do is walk into a courtroom, and this is a much nicer place. This is a wonderful venue. So thank you for having me. Let me tell you a little bit about myself, all right, before I start talking about the courthouse and court procedures. My name, again, is Karin Bell. I'm a new judge of the Superior Court. I've been on the court for a little over a year now. Before I was a judge, I'll just give you a little bit about my background. After law school, I worked for two judges for a few years. They call it clerking. So I did that for two federal judges for a few years. Then I went to a law firm because I promised my husband that I would help pay back my law school debt. So I went to a law firm. It was called Goodwin Proctor in Boston. I stayed there for about 5 years. I did a lot of criminal defense work, more white collar. And for those of you who don't know what that is, fraud type cases. So not violent crime, not drugs, but more like fraud type cases. And I was on the defense side. But what I really wanted to do and what I always wanted to do was to be a prosecutor. So about 5 years in, I was given the opportunity to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and that is what I did. And I stayed there for pretty much the rest of my career. So I was an assistant U.S. attorney for just about 15 years. I spent the first 10 of it here in Worcester on Main Street in the federal courthouse. So I have a great affinity for Worcester. The first judge I worked for out of law school was Judge Gorton in the federal courthouse in Worcester, and that was my introduction to Worcester. And I knew then I wanted to come back. The courthouse felt very much like a family. It was very different. The atmosphere was very different than that in Boston. And so I knew that eventually I'd like to come back there. And as luck would have it, there was a position open in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Worcester Federal Courthouse, and I was able to get it. And it was wonderful. And so I stayed there for 10 years. I prosecuted all kinds of crime, white-collar crime. I did drug crimes, violent crimes, immigration offenses, pretty much you name it, if I was given the opportunity to be able to prosecute it. After about 10 years, I was asked to go into Boston to the U.S. Attorney's Office there, and so I did. I served as the chief or the deputy chief and then the chief of the criminal division in Boston. And so it was a great opportunity, and so while I missed Worcester, I felt like I needed to take it. So I did that for about 5 years, and then it was time to go. I'd been there for a long time. I knew I wanted to be a judge. I'd been applying to be a judge for years and years. It's a long process, and I am happy at any point if you have questions about that to talk about that, but it's a lengthy process and one that's very difficult to plan. You can try to plan for it, but it's very much out of your control. So I left the U.S. Attorney's Office. I went to a law firm again for about 6 months to do, again, some defense work, some mostly white-collar criminal defense. And then I got the call that I was being nominated by Governor Baker, which is why I left the law firm, because that was ultimately my dream. So thank you. That's how I felt, too, at the time. I was surprised. I was thrilled. It really is what I've wanted to do for a very long time. So I am thrilled to be here as a judge on the Superior Court, and even more thrilled that they've put me in Worcester, because I'll give you a little bit of information about the Superior Court, but there are 20 courthouses that have Superior Courts in them throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and there can be up to 82 Superior Court justices. And we don't each have our own courthouse where we stay. They call it riding circuit. And what that means is every 3 months we change locations. So for 3 months you can be in Worcester, and then the next 3 months you might be in Norfolk County, and then 3 months after that, you might be in Suffolk County, and 3 months after that, you could be out in Springfield. So it is, that part of it's daunting, especially, I have 3 children, and that's really hard. So I have been very fortunate so far that they've put me in Worcester. I think part of it is my history in Worcester. There's kind of a culture in the Worcester Superior Court to have judges who have been in this community, and so maybe that's part of the reason. But so far, I've been very fortunate, and I've been in the Worcester Superior Court now for a year. So let me tell you a little bit about the Superior Court and how it fits in with the rest of the courts in the Commonwealth, just so that you know, okay? So I've told you a little bit, there should be up to 82 Superior Court judges throughout the Commonwealth, 20 courthouses. The Superior Court handles all first-degree murder cases. So that's the only place a first-degree murder case can go is the Superior Court in one of those courthouses. The Superior Court can handle any other criminal matter, but for the most part, what you're going to see in Superior Court are the more serious criminal offenses, ones that are punishable by state prison time, as opposed to time in the House of Corrections. Some of you may be familiar with the Worcester County House of Corrections. That's the jail. That's the local jail. All right, less serious offenses are often punishable by time in the jail, as opposed to time in state prison. If it's an offense that's punishable by state prison time, you're going to almost always see that in the Superior Court. All right. On the civil side of things, everybody raise your hand if you know what a civil lawsuit is. Civil litigation, people suing people for money, right? That's usually what's happening. Not always, but usually it's 2 people who have a dispute, and one of them is looking to be compensated for something that's happened. Maybe it's an injury, could be a contract issue, maybe a breach of contract. So for civil cases in the Superior Court, again, you're going to see the more serious or the cases that involve more money are going to be in the Superior Court. And what the law requires is it has to be $50,000 or more. So if whatever the dispute is involves $50,000 or more, people can bring that case in the Superior Court. Other cases, you can still bring them, but you have to go to the district court, okay? So those are the general kinds of cases that you're going to see in the Superior Court. Civil cases that are worth more than $50,000, okay, and more serious criminal cases. So just to put it in context for you so that you can understand where it falls in relation to the other courts, usually the court that people think of as kind of it's not the lowest court. It's not, but it's the court that the most people encounter, and it's the district court. All right, that's the court that probably has the most people flowing through it on any given day, because it handles such a wide variety, so many different things. Okay, so the less serious criminal offenses are there, smaller civil cases. Some of the cases you might see where someone is suing someone for $5,000 or $10,000, those kinds of things are going to go there. All right, and then right above the district court is the Superior Court, as I've just talked to you about. Above the Superior Court is the Appeals Court. So when people are unhappy with the decision that I make in any case, usually it's at the end of a case or towards the end of a case, they can appeal my decision. And that's a good thing. It's a check on me, because what if I made a mistake, right? I'm a human being. I don't get it right all the time. And so I look at it as a very positive thing. We have an appeals court above us. There are approximately 25 appellate court judges. They usually sit in panels of 3 when they decide cases, but sometimes they sit, all of them. They can sit, they call it en banc. So they can sit as a group of 25 in certain circumstances. So they're there to make sure that I got it right. And then above the appeals court is the Supreme Judicial Court, which some of you have probably heard of. There are 6 justices and a chief justice on the Supreme Judicial Court. And our Chief Justice now is Chief Justice Kimberly Budd, and she is the highest ranking officer, if you will, in the trial court system. All right? And the Supreme Judicial Court is also an appeals court. So sometimes cases go from the appeals court up again, they're appealed again to the Supreme Judicial Court. And there are sometimes different circumstances where a person can actually appeal something that I've done directly up to the Supreme Judicial Court. Just depends on the circumstances. All right, so those are the levels, the layers of the court system that you would see in Massachusetts, okay? Just to give you kind of a picture of where the Superior Court fits into that, okay? All right, so you have a basic understanding now of just the court system in Massachusetts, where the different courts fall, right? And just at least a little bit about what they do. The last thing I'll mention about that is some of you might be thinking, I've heard of a housing court, and aren't there other courts? There are, just so that you know. So the main trial courts are probably the district court and the Superior Court, but we have specialized courts in Massachusetts to handle certain subject matters. One of those is, for instance, probate and family court. Just raise your hand if you've heard of probate court at all. So if you need to get a divorce, if you have a child custody issue to work out, if you want to have your will handled, or probate, they call it probating your will, matters like that go to the probate and family court. The Superior Court sometimes can handle certain matters that are related to the probate court, but for the most part, all of those types of cases go through the probate court. And that also exists right in the Worcester Courthouse here, where I work. The probate court is there too. Housing court. How many people have heard of housing court? Yes, so that's a real thing. Evictions, when people are being evicted, when people are having issues with their landlord, whether it's the tenant having an issue with their landlord or the other way around, often those go through housing court. And we need there to be these specialized courts because there are so many of these types of cases. So they need to have their own home with judges who specialize in those areas of the law, all right? Another court you might hear about is juvenile court. Anybody heard of juvenile court? Maybe from, okay. So juvenile court is where any case involving a juvenile, usually it's an issue where the juvenile has committed a crime or has done something wrong. We don't treat them, for the most part, we don't treat them as adults. They have a separate system that they go through, and that's handled through the juvenile court, again, with judges who specialize in that area of the law. Okay, so those are just a few of the other courts that you may have heard of. All of those courts also exist in the Worcester Courthouse on Main Street. All right, so it's a big complex for those of you who haven't been there. All right, so that gives you a little bit of a sense of each of the different kinds of courts that exist in the Worcester Courthouse. So the reason I really wanted to come talk to you today is this. In the year that I've been a judge, but probably even more so in the 15 years before that when I was a prosecutor, and I've spent a lot of time in court. As a prosecutor, you're in court a lot. And you spend a lot of time with juries and grand juries. And now as a judge, I have similar experiences. I get to spend a lot of time with juries, and I see even more. I'm in court even more, and I see even more people coming in and out of the courthouse. And one thing I've noticed is that unless you're a lawyer or you're somebody who works in the courthouse, like Officer Bailey, who's here with me today, then it can be a very intimidating place, and the people that I see in the courthouse don't usually want to be there. They are not usually happy. They're usually, maybe they don't want to admit it, but they're a little bit afraid. They're very anxious, have a lot of anxiety. Just stepping into the courthouse gives them anxiety. They may have known exactly what they were there to do, and as soon as they go into the courthouse, their head is no longer clear because they're nervous. It's a big place. Usually people are going to court not for a good reason. Right? And most people aren't coming into a criminal court for a good reason. You've either been a victim of crime or you've been accused of something, or maybe you were a witness to a crime. None of those things are particularly positive. Even if you're going in for a civil case, that means you felt like you've had to sue someone, or you're being sued, or maybe you're a witness in a case and you don't really want to be there and you don't really want to be testifying for anybody, but you have to be because you got a subpoena. You got a piece of paper in the mail that said, you've got to come here at this day at this time. So I see that. I see a lot of unhappy people every day in my courtroom. One of the things I try to do as a judge, aside from my job of applying the law, is to make people feel as comfortable as they can in the situation that they're in, because I recognize that it's probably not a very positive one for any of them. And so that's really one of the things that I wanted to come talk to you about today is I want to try to spread the message that the courthouse doesn't have to be a place that is intimidating and scary. In fact, the courthouse is a tremendous resource for this community. It can be a tremendous resource for all of you if you are facing a difficult situation. Even understanding that the reason you're there may be a negative one, it can actually be a great resource for you. And its greatest resource, frankly, are the people who are in there. And I think when you come in sometimes, again, all of the people who work in the courthouse seem intimidating. The court officers seem intimidating. The people at the clerk's office seem busy and intimidating. And most people think I'm very intimidating. And I think it's just wearing the robe. I don't know what it is. You're up on the bench. But most people walk in and they find the judge very intimidating. And so I'm here to try to debunk that for you if I can, all right? And so that hopefully the next time if you have to go into that courthouse, you go in with you're a little calmer. You're not as concerned and you kind of know where to go and what to do, all right? So let me give you, I just want to give you a couple tips with respect to that, okay? Give me a just show of hands. How many people have had to go to the Worcester Courthouse? The Worcester Courthouse. Anybody had to go there? The big courthouse on Main Street. Anybody? All right. So most of you have had to go before. All right. Don't be shy. How many of you had a positive experience? Okay, that's great. That's excellent. How many of you had a negative experience? Okay. I see you raise your hand for both, so that makes sense too. I can see that. And how many of you were nervous about it? How many felt worried or anxious or nervous about it in any way? Couple. All right. Couple. All right. Good. I just wanted to get a sense. So let's talk about a couple things. The first thing I want to talk about is if you're going there, not because you're involved in a case, but for jury duty. Who's been called for jury duty? Okay, this is good because you're going to be able to give me some good information about how it was. All right, and so the rest of you have never been called in any courthouse for jury duty. Have you been called, but just a different courthouse?
Never been in.
Never been in, all right. So here's the thing. If you're 70 or over, you do not have to serve. So you should know that. Okay, by law, you don't have to serve, but you can elect to serve. And I'm hoping there are some of you out here who, if you're called in, would elect to serve, because I'm certain we could use your perspectives on our juries. All right, so let me tell you just a little bit about how the jury system works and how we select our juries, okay? And hopefully what this is going to do is just make it a more comfortable process if you do get called and you have to go in. And maybe it will encourage you to want to do it instead of opting out, even though you do have the right to do that, if you're 70 or older. And I don't know that all of you are. So, all right. So you get something in the mail, right? You get a jury summons in the mail saying you need to be at the courthouse on a specific day at a specific time. And you look at it and you say, okay, I can be there on that day. Usually you have to be there around 8 o'clock in the morning. All right. So you show up at the Worcester Courthouse. You go inside. We have a jury room where you are going to report to. Okay. It is reasonably comfortable, chairs kind of like these, all right, in lines, and you'll report there with your things. The worst thing that will have happened to you so far is that we can't pay for your parking. We cannot reimburse your parking. It's about $20 to park, and that is, I think, the criticism I hear the most from jurors, which I completely understand, because they're there giving their time, and we can't reimburse their parking. I wish that I could personally hand them the $20, but I can't, and I'm hoping that's something that we are able to change going forward, because I know that it will make people's experiences more positive. So once you're there in the room, you're going to watch a video about juror service, okay, just to give you a sense of what you can expect from being a juror. And then what's going to happen is a judge like me, it's usually a superior court judge, sometimes a district court judge, will come up and greet you and introduce the court to you, introduce themselves to you, and talk to you a little bit about what you can expect from the day. The purpose of that is to start kind of calming people's nerves. A lot of people they don't want to be there for a variety of reasons. Number one, they were expecting to be at work that day or hoping to be at work that day, earning money. Maybe they have family obligations that they no longer can do, and so they are not. Most people in that situation are hoping to get out of there as soon as possible. Okay, so it's someone comes to greet you to try to relax everyone, let them know generally how long they may be there so that they can take a breath and understand, all right, at least I know what to expect now. And then, so sometimes that's me. Sometimes I come in there and I greet the jurors. And what I generally tell them is I try to encourage them. And I try to encourage them by telling them that in my experience, despite the fact that the majority of people who walk into that room want nothing to do with jury service, the ones who are selected, I get to speak with them afterwards as the judge on the cases. I get to go back to the jury room after, and I get to talk to them and find out the good, the bad, and the ugly, all right? And we obviously can't talk about the facts of the case, but I can ask about their experience, how things went, what they liked and didn't like. And I will tell you that to a juror so far, I only have a year's worth of data, but to a juror, every single person I've spoken with has said, I am glad I served. I didn't necessarily want to do this when I came in here. I didn't want to give up a week of my life. I did not want to, sacrifice whatever it is they were doing. But they had such a positive experience that they said, I'm really glad I did it. And some of them have even said, and I wish I could do it again before my 3 years, because you get a 3-year window before you might be called again. So I tell this to all the prospective jurors, and I'm telling it to you because if that continues to be true, and I think it will be, most people really enjoy their experience as jurors. For those of you who've said they were jurors, how many of you had a positive experience overall? All right. Negative? Anybody have a negative experience as a juror? Have you been a juror more than once? Yes. Okay. All right. So you've had both. I wasn't selected. You were not selected. All right. Twice. And so that's the other thing I tell everyone is don't be offended if you're not selected as a juror. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't be a wonderful juror. But think about it. There are many cases, if I told you the facts of certain cases, where you would raise your hand and say, there's no way I can be fair and impartial in that case, because I've had a personal experience that's very close to that. Or my close friend has had an experience that is very close to that. And there's no way I can be impartial and unbiased to the government for bringing the case or to the defendant if it's a criminal case. So, and that's perfectly normal. We all come into the room with life experiences, and we can't tell you to erase those. So it's normal. There are going to be cases where, and maybe those were cases, maybe that was the case for you, maybe they just didn't get to you. But in some cases, you're just not going to be, it won't be the right case for you. But I guarantee you there is a case where you will hear the facts that the judge talks to you about, and you will know that you can be a fair and impartial juror in that case. If you get that opportunity to serve on a jury, I would strongly encourage you to take it. Number one, we need jurors from all walks of life. It's the only way that we can ensure that we have just verdicts. When we have a diverse jury of people of all different perspectives, ages, backgrounds, coming together to consider the evidence in a case and apply the law, we get that's when we, in those circumstances, and only in those circumstances are we able to ensure that we have fair and just verdicts. So it's really important to have people from all different backgrounds, all different perspectives, so none of you should ever think, oh, I'm not cut out to be a juror, I couldn't be a juror. That's not true, okay? That's not true. All of your life experiences would be an asset to you as a juror, okay? So I try to encourage the jurors as they come in these ways by talking to them, and hopefully that at least makes some of them a little less anxious about it and maybe a little more excited about serving if they get chosen. And then from that point on, we just have a discussion about what they can expect from going forward that day. Usually, if there's a Superior Court case, it's going to last a few days to a week, so you should know that if you ever get called for service, okay? If it's a Superior Court jury they're looking for, the trials are usually a little longer. If it's a district court case, and they'll tell you this when you go there, if it's a district court case, they're usually over in the same day. So you are not going to, it's not going to be as much of a sacrifice of your time if you get selected on a district court jury, whether it's a criminal case or a civil case, all right? And you should know that whether you get chosen or not, it still counts as your service, because we still value the fact you came in, you were willing to do this civic duty that's so important, and even if you don't get selected because maybe it wasn't the right case or we just didn't need that many people that day, it still counts as your service, okay? So just be aware of that. You look like you have a question. No? Okay.
You had to be there at 8 o'clock.
Yes. It's early. It is early. It is early. I was about to say, so usually between 10 and 11, That's exactly right. Usually between 10 and 11, the court officers know what cases are actually going to go to trial that day and what cases aren't. For those of you who don't know, many cases resolve themselves even on the very day that they are scheduled for trial. So if it's a criminal case, sometimes the defendant has been deciding, do I want to go to trial or do I want to plead guilty? He or she has a constitutional right to go to trial. But sometimes it takes knowing the jury is there and ready to come in the room for that person to make a decision one way or the other. And it's the same in a civil case. Oftentimes the parties have been back and forth trying to resolve the case, trying to come to a settlement. And it's difficult. And they're back and forth. And until the jury is in that room, it takes that to cause the parties to say, okay, we're going to resolve this, because we'd rather have a sure thing and know what we're getting than present the case to the jury. So in a lot of cases, you could get called for jury duty, and you go and you wait there for a few hours. The judge who comes in to greet you might say, well, there are 3 cases on for trial today. And then later, Officer Bailey comes in and says, no cases for trial today, because that's what's happened. All right, and that is very common. And frankly, it's necessary. If cases didn't resolve, we already have a backlog of trials in the courthouse, which we've been really steadily trying to work through, especially after the pandemic. And so if cases didn't resolve, it would be very difficult to try every single case. So it is important that some cases do resolve short of trial. All right. So that's just a little bit about jury service. All right. Anybody, just before I move on to the next, anybody have any other questions about jury service that they're wondering about or concerned about? All right. Good. Okay. Well, I do hope that some of you might have the opportunity to serve, or might elect to serve if you have that option and you're called. All right. So just a few other tips, I guess, about how to make the courthouse a little bit more user-friendly. Number one, if you're going to the courthouse, not for jury duty, let's say, but for a different reason, it could be a lot of different things, but because you're involved in a civil case, or maybe you're involved in a criminal case for some reason, all right? And maybe you're just not that familiar with the courthouse. You've only been there a few times. Remember that the people in the courthouse are your greatest resource, all right? So the first people that you're going to see when you go into the courthouse are the court officers. They will be the first people you see. You walk in, there's the metal detectors. For those of you who've been there, you walk through those. But you'll see at the metal detectors and at the security station, you'll see some court security officers. Probably the first people who work in the courthouse that you see. Most people don't want to talk to them. I'm sorry, Chris. I don't know why. There's a little bit of a fear. They look like authority figures, but they don't think, oh, this is a person I can go ask questions. He's going to help, he or she, they're going to help me. I want to tell you that's absolutely not true. Their job, as there is in their name, court security officer, is really to ensure the security of every single person, including you, who walks into that courthouse. And we are incredibly fortunate to have them. So it's not, Officer Bailey's here for me today, but every other day he's there for every single person in that courthouse to make sure that they're secure and that the courthouse is a safe place to be. But what that means also is that they know everything there is to know about the courthouse. Okay? They know exactly where every courtroom is. They know where every judge is at any given time. So if you have a question, if you walk in and you're feeling confused, and even though you have a piece of paper in front of you saying you need to go to the probate court clerk's office and you need to be there at 9 o'clock, or you need to go to courtroom 23 and report to this person, and you have no idea where that is, don't stand there looking bewildered when you first walked in. Go up to the first person who looks like Officer Bailey and show them and ask them. And I guarantee you they're going to be happy to help you, okay? Maybe get through security first, because sometimes that's stressful. There's a line sometimes, and the court officers are trying to move everybody through. So get through security, but then the first court officer you see, just walk over, show them what you have, and ask them your question, and they're going to be able to help you. They may not know every answer, but they're going to be able to point you to where to go, where you can get your next answer. All right? So don't be afraid of them or intimidated by them. Use them as a resource. Second tip. In the Worcester courthouse, when you walk through, right when you get through the security, to your right is something called the Court Services Center, okay? And it's exactly, it is what it sounds like. All right? It is there to provide services for people who maybe they don't have a lawyer. A lot of people who come into the Worcester Courthouse do not have a lawyer. Lawyers are expensive. They can be annoying. I was one, I know. I dealt with many of them. But many people want to do this themselves, and you can. The reality is there are a lot of things in the courthouse you can do yourself. There are. But if you're not used to doing it, if you don't do it a lot, then it's very intimidating. You're not going to know what form to fill out. You're not going to know where to get the form that you need to fill out. You're going to have a lot of questions. So if you're walking into the Worcester Courthouse because maybe you mentioned the small claims court, you want to file a small claim, right? That's why you're there. One of the things you can do is you can go through the metal detectors and to your right to the Court Services Center. And it's staffed in person twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I actually have a handout I'm going to leave for you so you have it about the Court Service Center, all right? So twice a week in person all day. I think it's Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then it's virtual every other day of the week from 9 to 12. So you can schedule an appointment, and you could sit there with if you have a phone, and you could do it in the courthouse, or you could have done it in advance before you came, or after, at any time. All right, but I'll leave the information for you so you know the hours of availability. But that is a resource for you to assist with a lot of the questions that you have or that you may have if you're coming into court to try to accomplish, let's say, to file a small claim or to respond. Maybe someone has filed a small claims suit against you, and you've received notice in the mail that somebody has filed this, and you've come into the courthouse and you don't have a lawyer, and you don't really want to pay for a lawyer because the thing that they're disputing only was $500, and it's going to cost you more than that to get a lawyer. So you'd rather not get a lawyer. You want to try to resolve it in some way, and you're not sure what to do. So, and that's completely normal and completely common. So that is a resource for you, all right? The only one thing I'll tell you is they're not there to be your lawyers. I'm going to give you some tips for that in a minute. But the people in the Court Services Center are not there to act as your lawyers, okay? So they're not going to give you legal advice. So for instance, if your question is, this is what happened to me. I got into a car accident, and I was not at fault, and I want to know if I can sue this person. I want you to tell me if under the law I can sue this person. They're not going to help you with those kind of things, okay? Because that's a legal question. And that is asking for legal advice. So just keep that in your mind. That's a different kind of question. I'm going to give you some tips for that in a minute, okay? So Court Services Office, remember that. Third tip, the clerk's offices. How many of you have dealt with the clerk's offices in Worcester Courthouse? Anybody? A little bit? Okay. A little bit? You have? All right. So for a long time, right? And people who work in the courthouse, who have been lawyers or just work in the courthouse, will deal with them on a daily basis. But the clerk's offices keep that place running. They schedule every case. They schedule every date in every case. They know every proceeding that's happening in every case, when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, what judge it will be in front of, what can be expected at that hearing, who is expected to be at that hearing. They really are a wealth of information. Much of it is computerized now. Some of it is in paper files still, but they're a wealth of information about every case in their courts. Okay, so keep that in mind. And there are people who run the counters every day. They're always there. There are people there. The way it kind of looks like if you've been to the Registry of Motor Vehicles or any government agency, it kind of looks like that when you walk into the clerk's office. There's a counter, and you go up to the counter, and someone will come. They're at a desk, and they'll come over to you and ask if they can help. But there are clerk's offices for every single court. Okay, so if you're there to go to Superior Court, maybe you've gotten a subpoena to come in because either someone is suing you, or maybe they want you to show up as a witness. They think you're a witness. Hopefully you have had some advance notice of this, but if you're just showing up because you've got something in the mail, you can tell from the subpoena or the summons that it's Superior Court because it says it on there. Another place you can go right away through the courthouse doors to the Superior Court clerk's office. They're all very well labeled. If you can't find it, you're going to ask one of the court officers that you see, all right, and say, I need to go to the clerk's office, the Superior Court clerk's office. They'll direct you to exactly where it is. Go right into the clerk's office, There's actually not usually long lines in these clerks' offices at all, and a little more so in the district court and some of the specialty courts, probate and family, but Superior Court, not usually. So someone should be with you pretty quickly. You show them what you have. They'll be able to look up the case for you right then and there and probably give you a lot of information that you need. Again, they're not going to offer you legal advice. You can't ask them, am I going to win this case? They're not going to be able to give you that kind of advice. But they are going to be able to help you know where to go, what to expect when you get there, who the judge is likely to be or is going to be, and what kind of proceeding you can expect is going to happen that day in court if you don't know. Okay, so remember that you can always use the clerk's office. You just want to make sure you go to the clerk's office that is, you need to go to the right clerk's office. So if you're going to go to Superior Court, you don't want to go to the probate and family court clerk's office because they aren't going to know. But they'll direct you. They'll tell you where to go if you end up in the wrong place. Okay, so clerk's office is also a great resource for you. All right, so now maybe you do need a lawyer. Okay, maybe you've decided that maybe you're being sued, and you're being sued in Superior Court, so it's not a small amount of money. It's not something where you feel like I can work this out by myself with the other person. I don't want to pay for a lawyer. You're being sued because, let's say you had a contract with someone to come build an addition to your house, and it did not go as planned. And they were supposed to finish the work in 2 months, and it was supposed to be beautiful, and your daughter-in-law and husband and their kids were moving into it. And you had a big plan, and it didn't work. It went very badly. 2 months have gone by, and the only thing that's happened is the foundation's been poured. And you've tried to work this out. You've tried to resolve it, and it's not getting any better. And so you've decided it's time to bring a lawsuit against someone, against the builder. Maybe it's the builder or different people that are subcontractors. Okay, and you're thinking this is more than $50,000. It's more than that much money, and so I think I might need a lawyer to help me with this. This is not something that I have expertise in, so maybe I do. So what do you do? Where do you go? Anybody know? Right? What do you do? The internet and just start typing in lawyers in Worcester? You can do that. But I want to give you a resource. I'll actually write it down on the handouts that I have for the Court Services Center. But if you go on mass.gov, okay, the mass.gov website is actually a wealth of information. But mass.gov, under the Superior Court section, I'll write this down so you don't have to remember it. Under Superior Court, there is a section called Finding a Lawyer for Civil Cases in Superior Court. All right? And it has a lot of information, a lot of places where you can go to try to find an attorney. Some attorneys, some of the resources will provide you with attorneys for free. Some of them, and a lot of them some of them may be low cost or lower cost attorneys, and then some of them might just be private attorneys that have a lot of experience in the area of law that you're looking to sue someone in. Okay, but it gives you a lot of different resources to go to. There are links. You can click on the links. Some of them are bar associations. Most bar associations will have a number that you can call, and they have an entire list of attorneys who have signed up through that bar association and said, here are the kinds of cases that I specialize in. All right, so I'm going to give you that link just so you have it, because it's just a good place to start. All right, it's a good place to start. Don't be overwhelmed by it if you need to go there, all right? But it'll give you just a place to, in case you or a family member finds themselves in this situation and they really feel like they need to have a lawyer. It's a Superior Court case. This will give you a resource to try to help find one, okay? Again, some of the lawyers listed on there are lawyers who are doing it pro bono, which is another word for free. They're giving their services. And some are going to be lawyers that are going to charge. All right? So that's another potential resource for you. Let me see if I have any more. Let me see. Two more, and then I'm going to just let you ask questions. All right, two more short tips. So if it's a criminal case, that I've talked to you about lawyers for civil cases. Just remember, if you or a loved one or a friend or anyone's involved in a criminal case, they have a constitutional right to an attorney, to have an attorney appointed by the court if they cannot afford one, okay? So you don't have to worry about, you can certainly get a private attorney in that situation, but again, they have a constitutional right, and we appoint lawyers all the time for people who are involved, who have been arrested and charged with crimes and can't afford their own attorney, okay? So keep that in mind. You don't need to go get your own if you can't afford one. The court will give you one, okay? And we have it's called the Committee for Public Counsel Services, is the equivalent in Worcester. Some of you may have heard the Public Defender's Office, right? That's the more common term. In Worcester, it's the Committee for Public Counsel Services, or CPCS, who provides lawyers in criminal cases, all right? Finally, last tip, don't be afraid of the judge, okay? That's my last tip for you. Do not be afraid of the judge. I don't care what courtroom you're in, okay? District court, superior court, if it's a criminal case, if it's a civil case, if it's a small claims court case, if it's a probate, don't be intimidated or afraid of the judge. That judge is there for the same reason I wanted this job, and I have wanted to do this for a long time. I want to help people, okay? I want to help resolve people's disputes. Whether it's a criminal case or a civil case, I wouldn't be there if I didn't want to work with people use my expertise to help resolve disputes for people, to help resolve criminal cases in a fair and just way. If I didn't want to do that, I wouldn't be doing this job. And I believe that that's how every other judge in that courthouse feels as well. Okay, so just know that when you come into this courtroom and you see the judge in the black robe, sitting way at the front, looking very stern, remember that, hopefully you'll remember what I'm telling you now. It may appear that way when you first walk in the courtroom, but the reality is that individual is likely someone who has had a lot of experience as a lawyer and who has decided they want to do this job because they want to bring that expertise to your case, and they want to do what they can to resolve that case in a fair and just way and according to the law. That's what they want to do. That's what they're there for, and that's what you want in a judge, right? That's what you want in a judge, and it may not come out exactly your way, but the judge, you can, I think, be confident that the judge is going to do what is fair and what is just and what the law requires. And that, just remember that as you walk in and you see the judge. There's no reason to be afraid. You're going to be treated fairly, and you're going to have a chance to speak, and or your lawyer will have a chance to speak, and the judge will be able to consider everything that you have to say, everything that you have to present before making a decision. Okay, that's why they're there. So that's my last piece of advice to you. Don't be intimidated by the judge, because I don't think there's ever really any reason to be. All right. So those are just my tips for making the Worcester Courthouse a little more user-friendly. Hopefully next time you walk in, if you have to walk in, or a family member or a friend is talking to you about it and they have to go in, you can say to them, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Here's what you do. You just find Officer Bailey, and he's going to tell you everything that you need to do. No, but hopefully this gives you a little bit more, just makes you a little bit more at ease. If you find yourself with a summons for jury duty, or a summons to come in for a civil case, or for any other reason. All right, so I'm happy to take questions. You don't have to, thank you.